there wasn't any sound. We had a wedding on Friday, and so everything was clear. The whole sound system, everything was taken down. And yesterday, John and Noah worked really hard putting it all back together again. But apparently, we had to make a few adjustments. So those at home, we apologize. But hey, you get the best part of the service, the sermon, right? Yeah. I love you guys. All right, well, we're going to move on with our passage here. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? Is it all good volume-wise? No one in the back is answering, so I don't know. Yeah. You can hear me. Okay, good. All right, so any atheists here this morning? Can I get a name in for atheists in the crowd? No? Hey, well, you'd be surprised, right? It's an odd way to start a sermon, but you would be surprised. We might all say that we're believers, but really the proof is in the pudding. And in this case, the pudding isn't what we say, but what? But what we do. How we live our lives. In my 30 plus years of attempting to be an effective witness for Christ, I've heard hundreds of times a phrase that goes something like this. Christians are a bunch of hypocrites. People who go to church are all hypocrites. Anybody ever hear that being said? Anybody ever say that? Be honest, right? And of course, you see this opinion over and over again on TV and in the movies. That's a hard statement to overcome because, unfortunately, they are right. People in our lives judge our message by our lives. They even judge our Jesus by the influence he has or doesn't have in our lives. Brennan Manning said, "The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, then walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable." That's what an unbelieving world finds unbelievable. I love that. Today in our Sermon on the Mount series, we start chapter 6. We have finished chapter 5, all of it. And we made it through. We made it all the way through chapter 5. We've learned a lot about what it means to be kingdom dwellers, to be people who are a part of God's kingdom, and to have our righteousness surpass that of the Pharisees. We've learned about murder, and it can take place in our heart. We've learned about adultery, where it starts in the heart and the mind. We've learned a lot about our anger and the management of it. We've learned a lot about loving others. And today is a continuation of what our righteousness should look like if we are kingdom dwellers. So we move on to chapter 6. And one of the first things that you'll notice when we begin to read in chapter 6 is that Jesus doesn't introduce this week's topic in the same way that he has opened up all the other topics thus far. Throughout chapter 5, Jesus began each new lesson with the now familiar phrase, "You have heard that it was said." And then he has that big but, right? Don't tell anyone I said Jesus has a big butt. That's not good. But this is a very good big but, right? He says, "You've heard that it was said, but let me tell you how it really is." Well, today he doesn't do that. As chapter 6 opens, Jesus doesn't challenge contradictory teachings anymore. However, he does carry on the same theme of challenging contradictory practices. So turn with me to chapter 6 of Matthew. We're going to read verses 1 to 4. It says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly I tell you, they have received the reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So in today's passage, Jesus challenges us to examine why we do good deeds. What is the purpose of you doing a good deed? And he cautions us to be careful. And where is Noah and Andre? There they are. There's Noah. Where's Andre? Oh, okay. All right. I want to make sure that they're out here because they always disappear, and I wonder what they're doing back there.
They can sneak out the back door.
Yeah, they're sneaking out the back door, right?
Now everybody's going to watch them.
I know. Thank you. No, because I'll ask him about. He actually listens. He sits over at the desk and he listens, and then he'll bring something up. He'll say, like the week of the coffee, he's like, "Well, it's a cat that makes that coffee, right?" I'm like, "No. It's not a cat." And he's like, "You said it was a cat." I said it was a civet cat. And he's like, "Yeah, like a house cat." And I'm like, "Weren't you in there? Didn't you see the picture?" And he's like, "Well, I sit over at the desk." I'm like, "There are pictures, you know. This is not just a word book. There are pictures." So anyway, I have pictures today, buddy. That's why I was asking. Now that I've thoroughly embarrassed my son.
Right?
I used to ask him, I said, "Buddy, do you mind when I talk about you in church?" And he's like, "No, I like it. It's fun."
He's grown up now.
"Buddy, do you like it when I talk about you in church?" "Nah, still okay, right? Still okay, yeah."
When do you get
You let me
home?
know when you're done with it, okay? You just let me know and I'll stop.
He's bigger now.
Janet what came in this week and she was getting ready to leave and she said, "Oh, I just want to tell you, you know when you call me out in church and I'm like, oh, don't do that." She's like, "What I'm really saying is, oh yeah, talk about me. I love it when you acknowledge me." So, you know, I feel like if my pastor called me out, you know, not in a bad way, but, you know, I would like it, right? Right? Right?
It wasn't in a negative way, Jeff.
Okay, we digress. Back to the message. So in today's message, we're going to learn about the motives of our good deeds. So the first thing that Jesus warns us about, because he kind of warns us about several things when we're doing good deeds. And the first thing he says is, don't give to be noticed. If that's your motive, to give to be noticed, well, your reward is here on earth. Somebody saying thank you is your reward. That's all you get. Look again at the first two verses. "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by men. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full." So Jesus cautions us not to do our acts of righteousness for the purpose of getting noticed. Now I want you to notice in verse 1 that Jesus added the clarifier, not to be seen by them. Jesus wasn't saying don't ever do your acts of righteousness in front of others. He wasn't saying that. He wasn't saying make everything top secret. If anyone finds out you did it, you're in trouble. No. What he was saying is don't do it in front of others for the purpose of being seen by them. So it's really about your motive. Please do not say, "Well, I can never give a donation in public again because Pastor Sam, I have to do it in secret." That's not what I'm saying. He wasn't saying don't ever do your acts of righteousness in front of others. He wasn't saying all your good deeds must be done one-on-one in secret. While that may be what's best in certain circumstances, sometimes it is appropriate to do a good deed in front of others. Not for personal accolades, though, but to inspire others to follow suit. To inspire, to encourage, to lift up. Sometimes organizations talk about the good they're doing so other people will be inspired to join the cause. Some people and some companies are all about being recognized for their donations and acts of service, but not all of them. And just because someone is being recognized for their service doesn't make it wrong or mean that the person is doing it with wrong motives. We have to be careful, Jesus says, and search our hearts for the motive in our public giving, because not all public giving is insincere. So it's good to examine ourselves to determine if there's a desire to be recognized when we do something nice for someone else. There's a video, I should have played it, It's a funny clip of people passing the offering plate and people who are giving for the wrong purpose. They're like fanning their money out and they're like fanning themselves as they put it in the plate, right? They're doing it for the wrong reasons, and their reward has already been given by somebody noticing that they gave. So be careful, examine your heart. There have been surveys where people were asked, if you could break the law with no chance of getting caught, would you? An overwhelming amount of people said that they would. But think about it the other way around. I wonder how many people would skip doing the right thing? How many people would skip doing the right thing if they were sure that no one would find out? You know what the right thing is to do, and you can get out of it, and no one will know. It's Christmas time. Some people do this thing called Secret Santa. You have a group of people who draw names and they buy gifts for a person, and it's a secret. But it doesn't stay a secret. No, in the end, everyone finds out who their secret Santa is. How many would still participate if it stayed completely anonymous? Do we do good deeds with the desire to make them known? In verse 2, Jesus starts out by saying, when you give. Not if you give, but when you give. Jesus speaks from the presumption that everyone is going to give. For the Christian, giving or helping the needy isn't an option. It is a requirement. Hebrews 13:16 says, do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. This verse reminds me of Deb Collins, because she has chickens at home. And what does she do? Every week she's bringing in eggs for the church people. She has a garden. What does she do? Every week she's bringing in stuff from her garden. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have. 2 Corinthians 9:7. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. It took me a while to get that one down. I would give, but it wasn't cheerful. It was painful. Right? Sometimes it is painful. Now, most often it's cheerful. Every once in a while it's painful, but that's good too. 1 John 3:17, but if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Oh. When, how much, and how often are all to be determined, but it is expected that a follower of Jesus will give. Richard Bronstein said, it is possible to give without loving, but it is impossible to love without giving. Amen?
Amen.
So part of the following two great commandments is seen in the act of giving. If you use an older translation of the Bible, you might see the word alms. Anybody have a King James or an older version that has the word alms in there? Yeah, if you use that older translation, you'll see it. Giving alms is giving money or other assistance to people in need as charity. So this wasn't just about giving money, but it was also about giving physical donations. It was also about giving your time to someone in need. Now, whatever the case or however we're giving, Jesus says we shouldn't broadcast it. In verse 2 he says, so when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets. Jesus wasn't being figurative here, he was being literal. The Pharisees were actually known to do this. They would blow a horn to get everyone's attention, and when people had gathered around, including the needy, since they knew that the trumpet sound meant that there would be some charity happening, the good deed was performed so that all would see. So they would stand up there, they would blow their horn, hear ye, hear ye. I'm going to give to somebody in the crowd today, right? Here's a penny. Thank you. They didn't announce that it was a penny, though. They gave it to him in secret.
Yeah.
But what did Jesus have to say about this? He called them hypocrites. Anybody ever have somebody call you a hypocrite?
Yeah.
I did one time, and boy, did that hurt. Hypocrite. That means you're fake. You're phony. You're a liar. Ouch. Hypocrite. He also uses the term hypocrites in the next two sections. We'll see him next week when he talks about praying and fasting. In giving, in praying, in fasting, Jesus highlights the Pharisees were being hypocritical, doing these things for show, for recognition. Their heart was not pure. They were doing good deeds, but not because they really cared about the person they were helping or the good that would come out of their offering, but for selfish reasons. It was meant to be self-glorifying. Speaking of trumpets, in the temple treasury there were these receptacles, and they looked something like an upside-down trumpet. And they were usually made of metal. So as you can imagine, when a lot of coins would be dropped into this vessel, they would make some noise. The more money a person gave, the louder and longer the noise would make. So those who gave a larger amount would make a show of it, right? Much to the delight of the Pharisees. But Jesus highlighted something that would give people a different mindset about giving. In the book of Mark, chapter 12, Jesus sits down across the street from the temple treasury. And he just sits there with his disciples and he watches what's happening in the temple treasury. That's where these vessels would be. People would come up, make a show of putting their money in. Listen to what he said when he observed a certain situation. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "I tell you the truth. This poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." I guarantee no one blew a trumpet when she gave her offering. It was probably not even noticed at all. I'm sure they scoffed at her meager offering. But Jesus decided to blow a trumpet for her. She wasn't looking for recognition, but Jesus gave it to her. It's debatable whether or not Jesus spoke loud enough for her to even hear. But Jesus acknowledged her gift. So it's quite possible that the poor widow had no clue Jesus was even giving her recognition. But I'm sure God let her know that her offering was no small thing and took care of her even though she had given all that she had. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 8:12, "For if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have." I guarantee that if she had more, she would have given more. Have you ever thought, I would give more if I had more to give? Anybody ever think that? A pastor was visiting a farmer friend of his, and he asked his friend, "You know what? Friend, if you had 100 horses, would you give me 50 of them?" And the farmer friend said, "Sure, pastor, I'd give you half my horses. If I had 100 horses, I'd give you half." And the pastor continued, "What if you had 100 cows? Would you give me 50 of those?" "Absolutely," the farmer friend said. Then the pastor asked, "If you had 2 pigs, would you give me one of them?" And the farmer, with a frown on his face, said, "Hey, now, pastor, cut that out. You know I have 2 pigs." It's easy to be generous with what we don't have, right? Oh, if I had that, I would give it. But what about when it comes to what we do have? Stop saying, "If I had that, I would give it," and start saying, "What do I have to give?" Wayne Dyer said, "If you are not generous when it's difficult, you will not be generous when it's easy. Generosity is a function of the heart, not the wallet." This is so important. Generosity comes from the Spirit, not the abundance of things to be generous with. If I have a spirit of generosity, I will be so with little or with a lot. I may have to be more creative when I don't have very much. I may have to make things instead of buy them. But that probably registers more with people anyway, right? It shows you're more invested when you give more of yourself. It's easier and quicker to hand someone money than it is to volunteer. It is easier to hand them money than it is to take time. Not that giving money is a bad act of generosity, but not having money doesn't equate to not having a means to be generous. Some of the most generous people I know are very poor. Jesus isn't teaching that the more you give, the more spiritual you are. But there is a connection between your willingness to give and to serve and your spiritual depth. Depth. In many ways, the two go hand in hand. But we have to include motive with that too. That's what Jesus is focusing on here. That's what it's all about. John Rayleigh Mott said, the world asks, how much did he give? But Jesus asks, why did he give? The world cares about how much you give, but Jesus doesn't care about that. He cares why you gave. We need to ask ourselves some tough questions when it comes to our giving. Do I give what I give so others will be impressed? Do I give what I give or help and serve so that I will get recognized for it? Am I okay with no one but the person that I'm helping seeing what I am doing? We need to be careful not to toot our own horn like the Pharisees did. The second thing Jesus cautions us against is to not let our left hand know what our right hand is doing. Look again at verses 3 and 4. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now there are certain things in our vernacular that don't make sense, but we know exactly what it means. Let's put an image up on the screen. What is this image? It's raining cats and dogs. What in the world does that mean? What does that mean?
It means raining hard. It means
It's raining hard outside, right?
I know where it came from.
Pouring down rain. It is drenching. That's what it means. Now, if you said this to someone who wasn't from the United States, they would probably look at you funny. If you said it's raining cats and dogs, they would probably look at the sky and then look at you and then wonder, what in the world are you talking about? Well, what Jesus said here in verses 3 and 4 is one of those things. At face value, it just doesn't make sense. How could we do something with our right hand without our left hand knowing about it? Well, let me give you 3 things that this statement means. We've come to understand that this means don't go telling everyone about the good deeds that you do. Keep it to yourself. Which is kind of like what we've been talking about. So this shouldn't be confused with the English phrase, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. That's not what it means. That implies that there are things going on in an organization that certain people are oblivious to. Aside from the clear implication of the phrase that we shouldn't boast about our acts of righteousness, there are other meanings implied by this phrase. Another meaning of this phrase could be, just as the right hand is close to the left hand, can be very close to the left hand, we shouldn't tell even those who are closest to us. Right? Unless God directs us to. We might realize it's wrong to shout it from the rooftops, but think it's perfectly fine to tell all my friends and family. Well, it might not be wrong to tell those closest to us. We still need to check our motives. Why are we telling them? Do we do that because we're excited to share how God has helped someone? Or is it so that they will think better of us for doing so? Charles Spurgeon and his wife, let me tell you a little story about them. Charles Spurgeon, one of the greatest preachers, his wife, they were very generous people. The Spurgeons had chickens. They sold their eggs. They sold them. And the thing is, they never, ever gave their eggs away. Not even to their closest relatives. Even when they asked, they said, no, you have to buy them. They sold all the eggs. This went on for years and years and years. As a result, some people started to label them as greedy. Only after Mrs. Spurgeon passed away did the full story emerge. All the profits from the selling of the eggs had gone to support 2 elderly widows in their church. Because the Spurgeons were unwilling to let the left hand know what the right hand was doing, they endured criticism.
Wow.
Another interpretation of this phrase is that since the right hand and the left hand are a part of the same body, we shouldn't allow ourselves to praise ourselves. If we don't get praise from other people, we tend to do it ourselves, right? We might not do our acts to be seen and praised by men, but we still have to be careful that what is done in secret isn't even praised by ourselves. My lips may be sealed, but my mind can be blowing trumpets, causing me to think of myself more highly than I ought. The bottom line is Jesus wants us to be doing our service with humility and for an audience of one, God.
Amen.
Again, I'm not saying others can't know what you're doing, but we need to be careful of our motives. What is the agenda? It feels good to be recognized for our efforts, but we have to be careful. We can feel good about what we do, but let's make sure those good feelings aren't generated by the praise that we receive from others. I have to be really careful because I like to be acknowledged when I do something good. And I've had to really train myself over the years not to announce when I'm doing something generous. And every once in a while I'll slip. And I'll tell somebody about my generosity. And you know what my thought is? Immediately the Lord convicts me and I think, oh man, I blew it. I just got my reward right there. Now that one's gone from heaven. I'm not going to have that one in heaven. I just cashed it in. Why did I do that? Why didn't I just keep that deposited? Why did I withdraw that? That's my thought. And then the joy is gone. It's very short-lived, people. Jesus wants us to be doing our service with humility. If what we do is for God's glory and not our own, then we're okay, even if our deeds are done publicly or spoken highly of. We might not be recognized or applauded, but we may even be compensated or rewarded. We might get an award for being a great donor and supporter of an organization. That's okay. But we shouldn't expect those things. The next thing Jesus warns us about is don't seek earthly rewards or you may miss out on God's reward. Jesus talked about this in verses 1, 2, and 4. In 4 verses, he mentions it 3 times. So if we give to be recognized, we will already have our reward, right? That's what I'm saying, man, I cashed that out. A reward is something good that we get for doing something good. You do something good, I give you a reward. The reward I get if I do my good deeds not to be seen by men, then that reward is, thank you. Good job. That's it. Good job. That's not a very good reward if you think about it. Because people, I guarantee you, when you start bragging about what you've given, people are not thinking, man, they're generous. You know what people are thinking? Boy, he's tooting his own horn. Right? He sure thinks highly of himself.
What a hypocrite.
What a hypocrite. Giving and then telling everybody about it? People are fickle. All of that, we love you, you're great, you did good. It will all be gone. I might get a standing ovation today, but receive a simple thanks the next time. The reward of man will lose its luster. It will get old quick. Plus, if we don't keep performing, people will turn on us. We're popular only as long as we can keep our image up or as long as we can entertain. As soon as our ability to produce wanes, so does our adoration. We quickly lose our status and people move on to the next shining star. But with God, we don't have to meet a quota of good deeds to stay in his good graces. He thinks you're great all the time. His love for us is not performance-based. However, he does reward our acts of righteousness when we do them for the right reasons. But it's not like God's bribing us to do good deeds. He's not dangling a shiny toy saying, do a good deed, do a good deed. He shouldn't need to coax us into doing good deeds by promising us nice rewards. Our good works aren't done so that we'll be rewarded for them, but rather because we love God so much. We love God so much that we now love His people. We love Him so much that it has spilled out of our hearts and onto those that God loves. Although we don't do good deeds by reward and for being rewarded by God, it is nice to know that He does reward us. Right? The purpose isn't to get a reward, but it sure is nice to know there is one waiting.
Amen.
Proverbs 19:17 says, "He who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and He will reward him for what he has done." I like to think that I'm lending to the Lord. I'm helping the Lord. I am being the Lord's hands and feet. Those who do their good deeds to be seen will get worldly rewards that only last a short while. However, the sincere ones will come to us in eternity. 2 Corinthians 9:6 says, "Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously." I want to share a story with you. In the late 1800s, W.L. Douglas was a shoe manufacturer who became nationally known, but it didn't start out that way. At one time, Mr. Douglas was unemployed and down to his last dollar. Even so, when the offering plate came around, he felt compelled to give half of what he had. So he put 50 cents into the offering plate. Later that day, he heard of a neighboring town offering work. So he rushed to the train station and found that the price of the ticket was $1. The voice in his head said, "You dummy. Had you not put 50 cents into the offering plate, you would have had enough money to buy a ticket to that town to get that job." He then asked the ticket agent, "How far can I get on 50 cents? The agent told him, and Mr. Douglas bought a ticket to that location. He boarded the train, and when he got to his location, he exited the train and began to walk around the town. He had not gone one block before he heard that the factory in town was hiring. Within a half hour, he had landed a job that paid him $5 more a week than he would have received if he had gone to the original town he was going to go to. When we do what God compels us to do, by the way, this man died early 1900s, a very, very wealthy man. When we do what God compels us to do, He will reward us in ways we never thought possible. God's storehouse is never empty. I want to close with this poem. It's anonymous. I don't know who wrote it, but I thought it was perfect. "Go break to the needy charity's bread, for giving is living," the angel said. "And must I be giving again and again?" my peevish and pitiless answer ran. "Oh no," said the angel, piercing me through. "Just give till the master stops giving to you." Generosity for the right reasons glorifies God. It results in thanksgiving towards God. And it brings satisfaction, blessings, and fulfillment to our own lives. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Yes?
So that verse that says, "Don't let your right hand, or your left hand know what your right hand is doing."
Right.
We've taken that literally at times when is somebody that we feel led that we're supposed to give them some money. We just reach into the wallet and don't look what it is.
Oh, that's
Trust the Lord for it, which
that's
it's
cool.
been uncomfortable a couple of times.
Yeah,
But that's the way that we've always done that.
that's kind of cool too. Did you hear that? That's neat. I like that. You just know that you're supposed to give. You don't know what you're supposed to give. You reach in and pull it out.
Pray first and then.
Yeah, pray first, Lord. Direct. Yeah. Wow, that's cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Let's try it again. I'm free.
Everybody carrying ones now? You guys. Oh. All right. May the peace of the Lord be with you.
And also with
Thank
you.
you. Love one another.
And
Be good.